Hello, and thank you for tuning in to our Carbon Net Zero podcast. Today, we are going to be discussing the environment, sustainability, and reaching carbon net zero. My name is Andrew Smith. I cover environment and sustainability here at CCS, and I will be your host for this session. We are recording over the internet connections today, so I will apologise in advance for any sound issues we may have along the way. So I'm extremely pleased to have with me today Adam Turner from DEFRA, not only a fellow sustainability colleague, but a font of knowledge that a number of us access quite frequently. And I know that he will be embarrassed to hear that. So, Adam, over to you. Can I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, Adam Turner. As you say, I work for DEFRA. My role is Head of Sustainable ICT for government departments and the wider public sector.
Thank you very much. So you mentioned, you cover sustainable IT for government and wider public sector. Can you elaborate on that a bit for us, please? I mean, because that's quite a title.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? Yeah, so the way we manage this is through a group called the STAR. So that is Sustainable Technology Advice and Reporting. The STAR operates as a centre of excellence. So every government department, as well as a number of agencies and bodies that sit beneath them, have membership on the STAR. And the STAR is empowered to really do two things. It drives the policy and the strategy on the topic, and it also does the annual reporting. And those members that I mentioned earlier are really, really important because they're not just sat in a meeting every quarter, nodding in agreement or whatever or not. It's their job to take what we develop and push it into the individual departments. So if we say in the STAR, for example, there's some really good stuff on the frameworks, and this is how you go about using it, we would expect those members of the STAR to push that knowledge into their departments and into their own departmental policies and strategies.
Will the recent events, things like the pandemic, has highlighted environmental measures to not to ourselves who work in government, but to general public as well? Has that had an effect, do you think, on on how it's grown within Star as well, and that willingness to report?
Yeah, I mean, what the pandemic has done is stuff that the STAR and the green ICT movement in general has been pushing for over a decade, i.e., give people the flexibility to work from home, give them the right devices to do it, roll out the collaboration software and tools that they can use that enables them to do that. You look back over the 10 years we've been doing this, is what we've been saying all along. So what the pandemic really did is forced that agenda onto everyone, and some were more prepared than others. And it's fair to say that some departments out there, and of course probably the wider public sector as well, had a very, very rapid learning curve at the start of sort of March 2020 to try and roll out the services and the equipment that was needed um, for everyone to be able to work remotely and carry on. But of course, it's fantastic that we've been able to provide the data going back over the decade, so we can say what the footprint was like, what in terms of numbers of devices, how much ICT waste was being produced pre-pandemic, and now during, and hopefully eventually post as well, so that we can see that. And I mentioned the Green and Government Commitments earlier. So in the next Green and Government Commitments report that hopefully will come out later this year, we will see the direct effect of that pandemic with, the 500,000 civil servants working from home, vast majority of them anyway.
Yeah.
A lot of offices not running at full pelt. All of the transport that would normally have happened, all those train trips and car journeys and flights, they will have reduced massively, but at the same time, ICT use will have increased. So we will be able to show that, and my prediction would be that the ICT increase will have increased. We would expect that because we've all been using things like Zoom, like we are today, a lot more. That just didn't happen before. People would have gone to London and sat in a meeting room for several hours, which hasn't happened. So, of course, there's been huge savings on that. So, yeah, the buy-in has been there because people suddenly wanted to know what the data was. And that has certainly helped. And I think that will help going forward in helping departments choose what they do next.
Yeah, oh, totally agree. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, the environmentalists in both of us that sit there and as we're working away, the pandemic, as horrific as it was globally, during that first lockdown, I know that I'd step outside and the air tasted better. And you were seeing pictures from around the world, weren't you, of things like was it the it was the canals, wasn't it, in Venice, where all of a sudden the water was clear, you were seeing fish in them again.
That's right.
So that I think prompted this whole Build Back Better campaign that started rearing as well just after the first lockdown. And that's led on to the willingness to do the reporting, to get more information out there. So we kind of liked what happened during that first 3 month lockdown, and we wanted to continue, but it's really hard to continue and go back to work and do everything that needs to be doing to cut more cars on the roads and everything else. So it's been an interesting one.
Yeah, that Build Back Better thing, I think it's kind of exposing a bit of a fundamental juxtaposition between sustainability and digital. So Build Back Better is being driven by data and availability of data. The whole mantra here is that we need more data and we need to do better with it and we need to share it better in order to understand everything that's going on. Of course, we need, and to get more data, we need more things like IoT, like Internet of Things. We need more sensors, we need more information. Of course, the problem with that is that you need somewhere to store it and you need some power to access it. And historically, the current figures that we look at are around 12% of the data that we own, and data is growing exponentially. So yes, ICT and digital is going to help massively, and has been shown, as you just said, that if we can live and work differently, we absolutely can, and potentially digital through the likes of AI, through blockchain, through whatever, we can do incredible things through digital. But we have to be very mindful that if we don't do it right, this sheer amount of data and the sheer amount of servers and buildings and energy that's going to need to be consumed could outweigh the overall benefits.
Actually, just then, as you were talking, I was thinking, this is where there comes this strange trade-off, doesn't it, between how ICT can help, but the cost of using that ICT in order to help, does it actually trade off enough? Because a lot of people, when they say, oh, we need to decarbonize the atmosphere and we need to help, we need to clean up and everything else that needs to take place, they don't think of ICT as being an enabler to do that. They think of ICT as just being a cost all the time, isn't it? A cost to both the environment and to the purses, so to speak. What's your thought on that? I mean, it doesn't balance out. The scales are tipped one way, aren't they? With ICT.
I think it's really tricky, and because I've been doing this for as long as I have, I've seen what happened first time round, if you like, for that 12 years ago or so, where the whole mantra was everything's getting more efficient, so don't worry about it. Put everything in the cloud, put everything in our more efficient hosting environments, it will be okay. And yes, we could report across government that our footprint was going down. We were working towards that zero carbon area. When we actually dug into the true impact of what was going on and asked the suppliers for our true footprint, we discovered that our footprint was a lot larger. And in many ways, I think this is very much what's going on again, in that there's huge opportunities to do things a lot better. But unless we are skilled enough across government, across public sector, in understanding where we're moving to, who we're doing business with, and really importantly, turning off the stuff that we don't need anymore, the overall impact is going to be larger. And that's because we're starting to measure. Yes, the providers would quite rightly argue that they are using green energy and moving towards 100% green energy, so don't worry about it. What we're recognizing as an industry is the bulk of the impact is actually in the manufacture and the disposal of the kit that's running and storing all of this information, i.e. the servers and all the network kit that goes with it. And because that is really hard to decarbonize, that supply chain, and we'll probably come on to this later, won't we? But that supply chain area is really hard to decarbonize. If you just look at that, the bit that's running the data center, that sort of scope one, if you like, on its own. Yes, you can target that bit, but it's the whole rest of it that is the potential issue. And as I say, if we're going, we need more data, then all of those problems are going to get a lot bigger and a lot more gnarly, which is a real issue. Historically, what I've seen in our data across government is that we just continue to consume more.
You could say in the last 20 years, our use of data and IT within government processes has just gone up and up and up and up and up. And since the pandemic, things like it's hard to even book an appointment at a doctor's just for a standard appointment without doing it online, which again generates more and more data. The influx of the circular economy is gathering strength as it goes forward as well, isn't it? I was chatting to one of my procurement colleagues the other day, and it's now the first question that's asked when people say, "Oh, can you help us with this procurement?" is what's the disposal option? Look at the end of life and then almost backwardly engineer, which is part of my engineering background, to reverse engineer, but backwardly engineer the procurement to get to the equipment, so that there isn't this, because the disposal option better not be chuck it in the skip. It is something in place. So, what's that mentioned on the Greening ICT report as well about circular economy?
No, it is there in very, very broad circular terms. We've had a zero to landfill policy for e-waste, which of course we should do because it's kind of the law. But we've had that as a target across government for many years, and we've also been pushing reuse and remanufacture. But in the new strategy that we published in September, we really, really pushed the remanufacturing element of this as a key component to improving circularity. And I don't want to dwell on it, but just to say remanufacturing is, evidence-wise, performance-wise, they are as good as new. And there's a new kite mark coming out which actually says if the remanufactured device has the kite mark, then the performance is as good as new. And as an added bonus, you're saving about, I think, 70% of the carbon than you would do than if you bought a new laptop. So that has to be a very, very good thing. And then on top of that, there's the move into a service model approach rather than what a lot of we do across government is we seem to still think we need to buy stuff. So we'll pay once to buy the thing and own it, and then we'll keep it running, and then we'll pay again to dispose it. Clearly, if we could do business with suppliers that could provide us with a service, in inverted commas, of an end user device that is given to us, and then as part of that service, they take it back, they upgrade it, and then they give it back to us, maybe refresh the screen, maybe put in a new RAM or whatever, that would be a much more circular approach than buy the thing and then give it to another operator to dispose of afterwards. Really heartening to hear that people are talking disposal first. That was always something that was really hard to push, because it's always the MOD had this thing. I used to work for the MOD, and they had this thing called the CADMID cycle with the D at the end: concept, acquisition, design, manufacture. Gosh, I can't almost remembered it all.
And at the end, you're doing well.
Go back. At the end was disposal. But of course, you never got to disposal bit. It was meant to be in there at the beginning, but it was often overlooked.
I suppose on some respects, the disposal, and this is not for discussion now, is security, isn't it? When people are worried about what they could have on their hard drive, so on and so forth. That, I think, is a separate podcast on its own, security on the disposal side. So
it is worth a mention, and I think really, really important just for people to something to hang on to for the future, as you say. But we're still in a world where security takes precedence, and I'm not arguing that it's really, really important. But what happens when security takes precedence is you end up with big bits of IT kit being chucked in shredders and grind down to tiny bits so that they cannot be reused. And sometimes that little bit of extra fault that maybe if you just removed certain bits for shredding and kept the rest of it that could potentially be reused, that bit sometimes doesn't happen. And that's what we'd argue as sustainability professionals is we're not arguing that security isn't really important. Take out the hard drive, absolutely. Take out the memory. and bits, but there's big bits of a laptop that you can reuse, or big bits of a phone, etc.
Yeah, I think unfortunately both of us have seen whole servers being thrown into those kind of grinders, and it's quite
Absolutely.
upsetting. It's upsetting to see. I suppose it will get to the point that technology will also get so good that it can clean and wipe old memory enough so that it is no longer accessible. I suppose that is. We're
Yeah,
kind of going off topic a little bit here.
no, I think the way the industry is probably moving, it's talking about edge computing and things like that, but
Mm.
you're looking at a world where the bulk of your information is going to be held, well, this is the way industry would like it to go, in the cloud. Whether that's secure or not is possibly another podcast again in itself. And your end user device is simply going to be something that is touch sensitive and a screen, and that very little will be held on the device, would be my guess where things are going.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I mean, years ago we used to call them dumb terminals, where it was literally a screen and a keyboard, wasn't it? And it all linked up to the server. So that has now expanded out to involve cloud. I suppose that's the other thing, is cloud and hosting, two different environments as well.
So yeah, that in a nutshell is, well, they are two separate things, but cloud is still a data center. But I suppose perhaps a way to think about it is you could potentially, if you were a government or public sector customer with a bunch of servers in offices and network equipment rooms and server rooms across your estate, you could potentially lift those racks of servers and put them into a more efficient hosting environment really easily, like Crown Hosting. That would be a very, very easy thing to do. We'll deliver instant savings in terms of carbon and cost because they're hugely more efficient. Cloud would be a lift and shift of the data and that information into their servers that they are running, and then the management of that data by those cloud providers would mean that they would push it around to whatever was the most efficient place for them in order for them to maximize space and efficiency and all the rest of it. And in doing that, they deliver cost savings and environmental savings to the customer as well. But what it means from a security point of view is you can't always pinpoint exactly where your data and information is at any one time, because it's not exactly sitting in server in Felixstowe at 9:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. It could literally be anywhere, and that's the problem when it comes down to carbon. So when we say what is the carbon consumption of a customer in the cloud, those cloud providers can't say, well, those are their servers, like they could in Crown Hosting. They could say, right, they've got 8 racks in Crown Hosting, they are using that much energy. In the cloud, they've got, I don't know, 500 terabytes of data sat in there or whatever. That
but
could be
spread across multiple sites, multiple servers, multiple
potentially
processes.
globally. Yeah, and it almost makes your head spin to think about it. But that is the problem when it comes down to pinning down consumption. But it's also, cloud is very, very exciting for what you can then do, because you're not limited to what that server can do. You suddenly open up to a world of possibilities from a massive environment where you can access all kinds of sort of data sharing and data mining and AI and this kind of stuff can be run on this data sort of munging data lake.
Oh god, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, you just said we do reporting. We look at different carbon footprints, different projects, how we can do this, how we can do that. And one of the things you just mentioned there was AI. Now, I get quite annoyed when I see daft things coming up on social media, such as using an AI bot for half an hour is the equivalent of driving a diesel car for 3 years or something like that, on the power that it uses. So how do you feel when you actually see, spurious claims like this going on? You think, well, where did that come? What's the calculation? Typical data freak. What matrix did you use to get that? How do you feel about that when you see that kind of information turn up on places?
Yeah, I think this is increasingly a worrying area for me, because what we haven't really got in-house across government is expertise that can, I'll put that more clearly. I think we should have a lot more expertise across government working directly on things like this, so that we've got our own in-house data. So bottom line of this is that AI uses a lot of compute and therefore a lot of energy to work out stuff. That is going on. There is consumption going on. What the figures are underneath that, as I've just said about the cloud thing, is it's really hard to pin down exactly what's going on in a cloud environment. So what we end up with is industry-led calculations that are kind of saying it's very, very low. And then on the other side of that, we've got academics that are using the best information available. But of course, that information is the information that's been released from industry itself or their own studies. Got industry on one side and academia on the other. The answer is probably somewhere between the two, but we don't really know.
But I think we're getting better at it.
We're getting better.
Yeah.
And as I say, with the cloud data, we will fairly shortly reach a point where we've got an agreement on what consumption is looking like in terms of carbon. But yeah, it's certainly not true to say that don't worry about it, just shove it in the cloud. But it's also not true to say that some of those figures that came out, an email is X number of grams of carbon, is possibly not quite as bad as it is either. But there is consumption, and there's an awful lot of emails, for example, flying around.
There seems to be an awful lot of emails just in my inbox at the moment. So you take one day off and it goes mad. So it's funny, something you just mentioned there, just for anybody listening. We do have expertise in the government. We could do with more. And that is actually is something I've engaged with a number of suppliers from CCS. And they've all said the same thing. Their concern is actually finding sustainability professionals, because there's suddenly become this rise over the last 18 months, 2 years, where sustainability, environment, carbon reporting, so on and so forth, has become higher up at the agenda of board meetings. They're turning around saying, we can't just ask so-and-so from the print rooms to do this anymore. We need a professional sitting down and actually going through this and creating this data and telling us where to go. You must have seen that as well in different departments that you've been dealing with via STAR.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it's linked in with that story of that curve, if you like, of interest and that trough of disinterest in the middle. So the big example we've talked about before, Andy, is the green ICT training that used to be run by QA, and it was sponsored and signed off by the British Computer Society. That was an established, decent qualification for anybody working in data centers or design to apply green IT principles to everything they were doing. But it was dropped due to lack of interest in around 2013-14. Interestingly, it's been revamped and relaunched this year. So we've got 7 years there or so with no, in terms of green IT, training out there whatsoever. People could go and find papers, but again, I do a lot of lectures at universities. When I speak to them, I have to say that when you're looking for the research on this, it's largely dating from around 2010, 2011. And yes, there's stuff coming out now, but there's this huge gap in the middle. So you're right, Andy, in that there aren't a great deal of people out there. When I turn up at meetings on this, it's a fairly small pool of people from across the government and wider private sector that keep turning up, and we need more. But I'm a big fan of IEMA, the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, who say that sustainability should be part of everyone's jobs. And I'm a firm believer. That's stuff that I've put into our government strategies for ICT, but it applies to any element of sustainability or any job, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that over the years, there's been a lot of focus on buildings for sustainability, things like BREEAM assessments, and for wider sustainability, ISO 14001. But that depth of knowledge that we need now at a boardroom level is, I think, really probably quite lacking. And especially because we need to be thinking in terms of, I don't know what you feel about this, Andy, perhaps you'd like to comment on this, climate resilience and climate breakdown rather than traditional sustainability, where sustainability was seen as a nice shiny report that was produced by a company or an organization to show how well they were doing. Whereas now it's more about how on earth do we keep the business running, looking into the future with global risks the way they are. I don't know, Andy, what do you think?
Very similar. I mean, I do get concerned myself, and I've often said that you and I are burdened with knowledge. We know a lot more about what is going on with regards to the environment and biodiversity, as well as energy and everything else that's happening than most. So that's why in our industry we tend to have burnout a little bit more regular, or just times of sitting there holding your head in your hands thinking, "Oh my word, what are we going to do?" But yeah, I think you're right. Some boardrooms are now taking on the thought of, okay, how can we make our business more sustainable? Some are thinking, okay, how can we repair? So we want to take sustainability to the next stage and think of how can we repair the damage that may have been done. Nobody in the environment holds anyone responsible when you didn't know. When you don't know about it, then it's hard to be responsible for it. But now that people are aware and they've seen the differences, and like we said earlier about the pandemic and how people saw a difference then, they're thinking, actually, yeah, there is something we can do. So how can we do this and how can we move forward? So there's more appetite for moving forward. So if there's anybody listening to this at the moment that actually fancies a bit of a career change, do consider environment, because we do need you. We need a lot of people. As I said earlier, when I've chatted to friends about it, environment, and I say, oh, yeah, I chat to Adam at DEFRA, they just think it's all about farming. DEFRA is about farming and wildlife, that's it. And as you just explained earlier, it's about a lot of other areas such as green ICT. So let's talk about rewilding, because I'm a big fan. But I suppose in some respects you could link that to the circular economy. Rewilding is about sort of returning some land into its natural course, so that it can even in some respects be used more as a carbon offsetting and carbon sequestration area than it was before.
Mm-hmm.
In your personal experience, so I'm not asking to quote DEFRA, do you see that there's been growth in this particular area as well, rewilding? And I do add the caveat properly, not people just saying, oh, look, there's a patch of land, let's throw a load of willows on it.
Yeah, so just to be abundantly clear, I do not own this policy area, so we really just are chewing the fat here. But yeah, I trained as an ecologist. I think we've talked about that before, Andy, so I've got personal passion for this. So rewilding gets caught up in a lot of politics, doesn't it? And when people hear it, there's probably already people listening to this that are thinking about wolves and bears and beavers and things like that. It's also wrapped up in things like biodiversity net gain, which of course is a DEFRA policy, i.e. developments before BNG came in were, obviously you had to do it. As an ecologist, I'd be sent out to survey potential development sites looking for things like great crested newts and dormice and bats, and then you tell them they were there, and then obviously they should make sure that they don't do anything about it. What BNG has done is said, well, you've got to leave everything in a better state. You've got to make sure the overall picture isn't just that you're mitigating the impact, a bit like what we were talking about with sustainability, but you're providing an overall improvement, i.e. you could look at a parcel of land and do something with that that's positive for the environment. So this is where the rewilding thing is really growing from my perspective. And I've got friends who own businesses that are doing exactly this, that are basically buying up huge chunks of land in East Anglia or Scotland and then go into businesses and they're saying, right, we will either offset or look at your development and come and use our land. And you can use that as a net gain area. And the way they're doing that is through rewilding, in inverted commas. So the argument then is, how wild do you go with the rewilding? Do you just let nature go? Bearing in mind, a lot of these sites are heavily farmed, either heavily farmed areas of land with all of everything that goes with it, the pesticides and fertilizers and all the rest of it. Very little else other than flat ground. Or, in the case of Scotland, heavily planted areas of non-native firs and pines, etc. So what do? Do you just let it go and let nature do its thing? The planet's pretty good at doing its thing. Or do you take a view that we as humans turned it from that into what it is today, perhaps we could give it a helping hand.
I guess it's one of those things that, I mean, everyone's saying, oh, to offset, you just plant trees. It's all like it's the first jump. And I think a personal concern I've got within the IT industry is, all this equipment's coming in, it's all being used, the data's being created. Is everyone's just saying, okay, we're creating this energy, we're using this energy. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to offset. And to do that, we're going to work with this company or organisation who are going to plant 10,000 trees for us to offset. And as a personal side of things, I can't see the benefit of just planting a load of trees. I think it's got to be much more than that to move forward properly with it. So, I mean, also, we both discussed this before, trying to avoid offsetting, just try not having the emissions to start with would be the better route. But there is obviously, we are going to still have emissions. So offsetting is the better option, albeit not the preferred, isn't it? So,
yeah, it's really difficult. And, the really simple fact about trees that someone said to me several years ago when I was talking to them about offsetting is, of course, they're only storing the carbon for the lifespan of that tree. Of course. But I think you can get hung up in, let's plant some trees and take all that carbon out of the atmosphere. I mean, if it's a certain species of trees, it's only going to literally be 100 years, and then that thing's going to be down in the ground, releasing that carbon again. So yeah, absolutely key. We reduce as much as possible, and then I think what we do is we look at things like rewilding to convert land that is currently potentially being used for other things. I mean, at the base of all of this is really deep and meaningful stuff, Andy, but at the base of all of this is considering how we want to live as a society. And at the moment, we give over huge swathes of land to parks or to farming or recreation or housing or whatever. In that mix now is rewilding and the importance of carbon sequestering and, more importantly, biodiversity and improving biodiversity and all of that. And how we balance those things is going to be one of the really tricky, probably political things that we have to face going forward. Because also in the balance of that is the supply chains for our energy and our food and how we do that moving forward. So it's really nice on the face of it, isn't it, to talk about releasing some wolves in Scotland. But when it comes down to it, we've got to think about energy security. We've got to think about food production. We've got to think about people's livelihoods as well.
Totally agree with you on that. And this is where the circular economy, the ICT side of it comes in as well, is, using everything a little bit longer before it goes back in to be a refurbished. So do you need to have a yearly telephone upgrade? As you were saying earlier, you can take some equipment and sometimes just an upgrade to 2 or 3 components, and it's going to be faster than what you actually need, and we'll see you another few years. So it's looking at a project and seeing what you can do with that ICT project long term, rather than, this server's getting old, let's ditch and get a new one. Even if that ditch, and I use that quite loosely, is going off to a refurbishment company where it'll be stripped and refurbished. Making more use of it and keeping it together. And that's down to us as individuals as well, isn't it? Keeping hold of our phones and our laptops, and until it is to the point where actually I can't use this anymore. I need to upgrade now, rather than I want to upgrade because the new one's a little bit flashier and it's a little bit quicker. Isn't a good enough excuse.
No. And there was an article in The Guardian. Yes, it was The Guardian. So it has to be taken with that in mind. But there was an article in The Guardian about actually ethically, perhaps we shouldn't buy the new iPhone as consumers for exactly those reasons you just said. Don't really need it. Do you actually need 3 camera lenses on the back of your phone? I'd argue that we don't. But the ridiculous situation is, I'm with, I won't mention the brand, I'm with a mobile phone provider. They are offering me an upgrade at the moment. I'm using my phone. It's absolutely fine. I want to swap out the battery. To swap out the battery will invalidate the warranty, but also cost me between £50 and £60 to do that. I can upgrade my contract now to my phone to get a brand new shiny phone at no cost to me. So what do you do? The big part of me is saying, well, I just want to keep my phone going for as long as I possibly can. But the market is pushing you to upgrade. And the thing that sticks with me is that they don't want your phone back currently. And that's not the model. The model to make it circular is they should be demanding you give your phone back. They should be encouraging you to give your phone back. And yes, so these little schemes, send it back to us and we'll give you 20 quid off. But it needs to be a lot more than that. There should be like amnesties. Give us your stuff back. Because we're throwing away billions of pounds every single year worth of e-waste with all the gold and silver and, all the other rare elements.
Yeah, it's a finite resource that we've got, and seeing it just disappear. And people say, "Oh, no, I don't like to return my phones. I've got 9 in the drawer now because some of them have got pictures on." And you think, "Well, take the pictures off then." This is, and help.
It's such a common story, isn't it? I think everybody, if we're honest, and me included, has a drawer full of e-waste.
Yeah,
and they call it urban mining. You can look it up on the Googles and other search engines. Ask Jeeves. Urban mining is a thing, and there is huge money out there if anyone can come up with a good business model for how to collect all this stuff in a way. There was some good stuff done by Tech UK. Big national campaign with a big pink cat. That's all I remember about it. I wish I could remember what it was called, but to do with exactly that, donating your old phones and laptops and stuff.
Maybe some sort of Blue Peter campaign would be needed to help push that forward.
Yeah.
So on a last note, and it's something that we discussed a few weeks back just before you went on holiday. We're talking about rewilding, thinking about the future, and something that is quite nice, but I cannot remember the Japanese phrase for it. It's forest bathing, where you walk in the woods. It's good for your mental health. It's good for you physically. It's good to breathe clean air. What's it called again? I'm trying to remember. Shinrikyo or something, wasn't it? I can't remember.
I think we should have done some research, but yeah, I'm a big fan. You can Google it while I'm talking.
That's what
we were talking. We were talking earlier about sustainability professionals and burnout. So I have been thinking a lot about this, and I think as we as current sustainability professionals trying to bring more people into the profession, as we bring people in and as we open people's eyes up to the reality of what's going on across the planet, you will experience things like burnout, and you will experience massive eco-anxiety, and you will get like depression and anxiety, and you see this with the kids, and it was all over the again this weekend in the newspapers. The percentage of kids that are struggling with what's going on in terms of climate change is huge, and it's all to do with this stuff. I'm convinced that what you were just talking about there, forest bathing, is part of this answer, and it's you can also find it under the term ecotherapy, and it was covered in that Dasgupta review that came out a few months ago, where the National Health Service is looking at prescribing nature-based solutions for people as part of their recovery. But I think it's deeper than that. I think what we should all be doing is trying to find that connection that we've lost, especially in the last couple of 100 years as we've moved from the countryside into the cities. Find that connection with the landscape a little bit more that we all feel when we go to the beach and when we go for a walk in the woods and all the rest of it. That needs to be part of everything that we are, so that when we make decisions around what technology we want to buy, what car we want to buy, where we want to go on holiday, what food we want to consume, what decisions we want to make in life, all the rest of it, there is a bit of us that is based in nature. And I think that's really, really important, and an angle I'm going to pursue heavily.
Do you know what? It's called Shinrin Yoko. Is the actual pronunciation, for forest bathing. And, I think that is the perfect way to bring this in conversation with, this chat with, to a close, is just consider nature in yourself, in your well-being. And in any decision you make moving forward, is absolutely spot on. So, Adam, it just reminds me to say thank you very much indeed for your time. and giving us some insight to STAR, what it's been doing, how it's been moving forward, and how it's growing. And to the environmental professionals out there, some people that may be looking at this, going down this particular career path, good luck. It's been really interesting and a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. It's a real pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, come on, everyone, come and join us. It's great.
Come and join us. Come and have a chat. Thanks for listening in today. To learn more about how CCS can help you on your carbon net zero journey, please visit crowncommercial.gov.uk/CNZ. Thank you.